Hello YouTubers. Today I decided to do a video on Bruce Lee. He's a very famous, wide-known film actor, and I'm going to argue that he's more than a film actor, but also a martial artist. And that's a big contention point for many people who just say, "Oh, he's just in the movies. He can't really do anything. He can't fight. He doesn't know anything. Yada yada yada." So let's go into this. Let's tackle into this subject. So the first argument I'm going to pose is that one, Bruce Lee is a fighter, and here's the first rationale of how we could know that he is. The first thing to being a fighter is you want to know, do you have the tools or the means to fight? As in, you want endurance, you want good reflexes, you want quickness and strength. Does he have these abilities? You know, precision, etc. I think just from videos, you can see when like Bruce Lee flexes in some of his movies, and you see his huge, gosh, can't even think of the muscle name right now for the side, the wings. You know, see him if you ever watch bodybuilding. Ronnie Coleman's has like huge of these, and he's known for his back because of them. But yeah, he had muscles. He was very toned all over his body. He, if you watch any documentaries on him, he's been known for combining both health, diet with exercise. So he exercised a lot. He did good dieting and was really toning a lot of muscles many people didn't even really know about or consider, such as these side muscles here. If mine were huge, you know, I would demonstrate in his fashion. But yeah, and yeah, you notice he had, you know, cut abs, good, you know, lean body. There are quotes from doctors that said when they were studying Bruce Lee's physique, he had the physique of a 18-year-old when he was 30. So that's how, like, that was his health standard, and that was just how low of fat he basically had on himself. What else? So I think physically he's there. I think if you look at videos and see how high he jumped, how accurate and how fast his kicks were, even if they were rehearsed, just the speed at which they are done shows that he has the tools there to be both accurate and fast. And from reports from people there on the movie set that I was reading some articles on, and maybe I'll try and link these sources if I get a chance. But they were saying that he actually had to slow down his punches because they were too fast for the camera. Kind of like my camera's kind of bad, so my punch would be kind of blurry like it just was for this camera. So I think he had speed. I think he had accuracy. I think he had good reflexes. He was pretty quick in the combats that you see if you watch him in Enter the Dragon or The Big Boss, or many of his other films. He does some pretty athletic stuff that requires both speed and strength and power, you know, whether it's how high he jumps and all that. So I think physically the tools for being a great fighter or an effective fighter is present in Bruce Lee's abilities. Now, whether he actually knew anything about fighting, clearly he thought about fighting a lot. He wrote a book, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. If you look at the Life of Bruce Lee, I think was the movie, where basically it shows that he had a school and he was teaching Wing Chun and different of the formal arts. You can see that he did have some knowledge about fighting, and if you read his philosophy of fighting, it was actually very much on the level of MMA today, where the idea is, he called it making no way your way, as in you don't pick any given path. You don't pick boxing, you don't pick kung fu, you don't pick karate, you don't pick any given type of fighting, jiu-jitsu, you don't pick one. You need to make no way your way, as in you have to take them all. You have to open up all paths for yourself. So he also kind of said sometimes you make no limit to your limits. So they sound kind of confusing and paradoxical, But once you break down the meaning, it kind of makes sense. You put no path as the path you're taking, so you're taking like all paths. That's the idea, and I think that's good because I think in fighting, and we've seen this in MMA, we always have the boxer versus the wrestler, or the well-rounded guy versus the guy who's only proficient in one skill. And sometimes, some guy is so proficient in one skill, and let's take Chuck Liddell. He was really proficient in counter punching, and he had knockout power, and all he did was stop the takedown. So he had no real wrestling skill. He just said, all right, I'm going to try to negate wrestling by not getting on the ground and bring the fight to strikes only. He had such knockout power, people had to stand back. That made it harder to take down, etc. So it's not to say that it's impossible to be a one-way fighter. I argue Chuck was, or Matt Hughes was. But if you keep looking at the sport and you look at people like GSP or Tim Silva or many of the other fighters, they may be more proficient in one area than another, but they have a well-rounded set of skills and are very talented. And that was basically what Bruce Lee was arguing for, was that don't limit your reactions, your abilities, your options to one style or format. That just makes you more predictable, and that limits the number of outs you have in a situation, because no one style is best. Sometimes you get a situation you need to be doing this, and if your style doesn't account for that or know how to do that, then obviously you're not going to be as effective as you could be. So he had the right mentality for high level fighting, for MMA level fighting, and he had the physique for that. I think he could have easily endured 5-minute rounds if we're going to go by UFC standards for what constitutes someone who's in good shape for fighting. I think he easily could have did that. So philosophically he was good. He had good dedication. He trained daily. He ate healthy daily. So the dedication was there, the physique was there, the mentality was there, and he was advocating this type of thinking, MMA type of thinking, well before MMA existed. Dana White, I know he's somewhat unpopular with some people, and honestly with me sometimes, when he kind of tries to hype up his own show and belittle all the other shows, which I think is kind of sad, really, because I think it's better just to have a bigger pool of fighters, and then you would likely see better matchups, and with more people, you'll find more superstars, to kind of dominate the divisions. But Dana White, said Bruce Lee was the father of MMA, and I think maybe throughout history there may have been someone else with the same mentality. I don't think the idea is so profound that only Bruce Lee had it, or Bruce Lee was the first person to ever had it, but I think he was one of the first major advocates of it, and one of the first people that lived it, like went, watched US boxing, watched Chinese boxing, watched Thai, watched, all the different art forms that he could get his hands on, and start adapting them. I remember some quotes I was watching from Bruce Lee, and I thought this was kind of cool, that he only believed in lower leg kicks. This was Chuck Norris quoting Bruce Lee, that he believed that those were the most effective leg kicks, were kicks below the waist. And I found it really cool when I was watching MMA. I was really into it at one time, and now I just catch it here and there. But was that 90% of their kicks were to like the inner leg or just the lower parts of the body. And so I was like, wow, Bruce Lee was, ahead of his time and really saw and knew that. And I think Chuck Norris replied to him, he's like, well, it's nice to be able to kick low, but you might as well have all your options open to you. Which I guess that's true as well, but Bruce was right that the main focus of the kicks was to the lower legs. They're safer, they're harder to get taken down after you do them, and they're definitely effective. They definitely are good for setting up for punches, for future takedowns, because if their leg is slow, they're slow to move. It was really good foresight, and it made me appreciate Bruce Lee more. And I think if anyone read his book, Jeet Kune Do, which I have, I should have brought it with me, but I have that book and I have looked at it. And it's really interesting, and he does talk about a lot of stuff that makes sense about fighting. So what else can we say about Bruce Lee? He has the dedication, he has the physique, and he has acquired a lot of knowledge about fighting, and has clearly thought about it extensively. I mean, he trained in schools about it. So I guess the only thing left to go on for like how good a fighter he was, like I think the ability to fight was there, and obviously he was training to fight and learning about fighting. So I think it's safe to say, based on that alone, based on his physique, his knowledge, and his dedication, that he was probably a decent fighter. He was going to beat your average person. If an average guy just ran up to him, say me or someone else, they are very, very likely going to lose. They probably don't have the shape or the conditioning that he has. So 5 minutes into the fight, they might be winded. He might just win by default at that point. Yeah, they're not going to have as much training as he has. They're not going to have his speed, etc. So he'll probably dodge a lot of their punches, and his striking game would probably be pretty high. So, yeah, I think just based on those, I guess we call them values, those statistics, those stats, yeah, it's safe to say that he would have been a decent fighter. Now, whether he was a great fighter, so hopefully you're convinced that he was a decent fighter, just based off that reasoning. But whether he was a great fighter, I think it does take more than that, and I think all we can go on is just the words of people around him, and assume that they're not all lying. They're not all in one big plan to lie about him. Like Chuck Norris, who said, he was the champion of karate, and that he was afraid to fight Bruce. I mean, he admitted it in numerous interviews. You can find them very easily on YouTube. Maybe I'll even link to one. But he said that he wouldn't know if he could beat Bruce Lee. And other times, it's been said that he admitted he would lose to Bruce Lee. He's also flat out said he was a very skilled and able fighter. So, he was very talented. He flat out says Bruce was good. You can quote, Chuck Norris on that. Many of his students, obviously, said, Bruce was really, really good at what he did. And as you would imagine, on movie sets, people actually, because Bruce is kind of named up really big, and they're, people are racist against, Chinese people at the time, and people just want to know if they're the best. So they actually kind of came at Bruce and are like, are you really that good? If you're that good, let's fight. You know what I mean? Because he's trying to paint himself as like a premier fighter, like a #1 fighter. And from what I understand, from what I've read, and from documentaries I've watched, he actually accepted many of these fights, and he would consistently defeat these opponents. Now, granted, these are random opponents of probably vastly varying skill levels. I'm pretty sure they probably are in the street fights, right? I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want to go fight a random guy because I don't really fight often. So there has to be something wrong with your mentality if you just want to go fight somebody and you think you'll win. So you probably have some fighting experience. You're not just like a completely average person. But that doesn't mean you're really MMA quality either. So I don't think that Bruce Lee was necessarily facing MMA quality opponents. And in those fights, I mean, he also did demonstrations in tournaments. There is some YouTube videos that show you his two finger punches, but they also show little brief sparring matches using like Wing Chun style. And he consistently was. I've never seen him at a disadvantage in any of that footage, and it's all like really old though. And he did some really quick moves. He'd like do like a quick snap punch, and like his fist would like linger right in front of the guy's face, and he'd bring it back. There were quotes when he was doing his like 1-inch punch, like you use like your finger, and then you it's really kind of like your body's into the punch, not just your hand, but like you accelerate the distance of 1 inch, plus you get the kinetic energy transferred from your body and legs into the punch, mostly your hips. You get that snapping motion. So he would do that from 1 inch, and people, reported like, cracked ribs from that, or being knocked back. Like the guy showed himself knocked back and like landing like in a chair that's supposed to catch him, but the chair just like falls over. So I mean, clearly he had power, and he was he was known in the karate, taekwondo, the martial arts world. He was definitely known. He was definitely a part of it. He did, you know, they don't not just going to invite anybody. If it was just purely, you know, as if it was purely just he was a movie actor, I don't know why they would want to invite him into those arenas. And he would do well in those arenas versus trained professionals. So, yeah, I will say this to close this off. I hope you're first convinced that he had the tools and ability, the know-how to be a great fighter. And I think it is safe to say he was at least a good fighter, meaning he would beat the average person very easily because he had the endurance, the accuracy, the speed, the training, the dedication, and a good amount of knowledge about fighting. Whether he was a great fighter, the best in the world, I think those are open questions, those are valid questions, and those are questions that sadly cannot be answered because it just didn't happen. I mean, he kind of, like, whether he would just beat anyone, I mean, I don't know. I really don't think he would necessarily beat anyone in MMA, partly because of their rules, because, I mean, like, when he was saying he could beat anyone, I mean, I think he was relying a lot on his speed and technical skill, like, you know, he wanted to do, like, eye gouges, and he actually practiced that, and there's some boards that were like being shown that like have his like indents of his fingers, or like he took like the old Coke cans. I don't know. I guess they're made of like real tin or whatever, and now they're made of like some cheaper alloy. But like you take the old Coke cans and you just like pierce through them like that with his fingers because he's mostly because of the speed, I guess, and like how like rigid he kept them. And so like you know his idea was doing like everything was legal. Like he was going to do groin kicks to win. He was going to do kind of poke out your eyes to win. He would like literally use all the tools. Like if it was a fight for his life or like a real just plain out brawl / street fight, he was going to fight very, very dirty, like not clean at all. And I think in that sense, maybe with those techniques at his disposal, he could take on some of the heavier weight class guys or bigger guys, or you know, just other skilled fighters. But I want to take the last couple minutes here, see if I can cap this off before 20 minutes goes, and talk about Bruce Lee in MMA today. How do I think he would do? I think he'd beat all like the low guys, but I think once he got up higher, I think these people probably had more quality fighting experience than him. So I think there would be a bit of a learning curve for him to get to. Also, if you read Jeet Kune Do, if you look at any material about Bruce Lee, he didn't really have, it didn't seem he had any extensive learning in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a huge part of fighting. And if you don't know that, if you don't know how to position yourself, you don't know what the other person's trying to do, like setting up for, so you can't anticipate, that is going to be a huge downfall for you. And so I feel on the ground he would have been very vulnerable. And I really feel that the UFC fighters and MMA fighters from all arenas, Pride, Strikeforce, I mean, they have quality fighters, and I really think that that breeds real fighting. Because if you do well in that, then that means you can take hits. That means you have good instincts. That means you have good abilities. You're very technical. And I think, you know, being a champion in that is much more significant than being a black belt in Taekwondo or any of the martial arts, because many of them have been tailored to a broad audience of people. So like it's not as physical of contact, it's not super rough, you know what I mean? But it means something, and obviously many of those guys have belts in those things, but it doesn't mean necessarily your chin's good or you can take hits or you know, all of the things that being a UFC champion entails. So I do feel that he would lose to the higher end fighters in UFC. I do believe that. I believe that a lot of times it would be probably by submission or maybe even by knockout, ground and pound. Because I feel that would be his greatest weakness. But I'm not going to say that he would be totally ineffective, and I'm not going to say that he couldn't even, that there wouldn't be some learning curve for him where he could actually begin to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and adapt and fight, what I would say on their level. So, especially since they're taking out the groin shots and eye gouges and all that. I mean, this is by UFC standard rules. You're going to win by strikes, grappling, etc. And so, yeah, I would freely admit that Bruce Lee would probably lose in MMA today based on lack of grounds knowledge, but that he would do pretty well, and that overall he was a good fighter. And it's sad that he's not around today to show that he was a great fighter. I personally believe he was probably a great fighter, that he was probably at the very top of the echelon of his weight division. But yeah, we'll never know that. But hopefully this video will convince you that he was just more than just an actor, and that he was at least a very talented and solid fighter, and a good fighter at minimum. Anyway, thank you for watching this, and I'll see you guys later.